The late-night diner hummed like a dying transformer, neon lights outside flickering red and blue across the fogged windows, mixing with the smell of burnt coffee and old grease. In the same cracked vinyl booth he always chose, Cal Grimm. Mercer sat heavy in his leather, shoulders broad, jaw locked, eyes never leaving his boy. Every Thursday night, it was the same ritual, same booth, same silence, same fear. Noah's small hands trembled around the milkshake cup, knuckles pale, lips pressed tight as nausea rolled through him. When he finally gagged and pushed the drink away, he whispered an apology, like being sick was something he'd done wrong. Grimm said nothing. He just watched, helpless rage simmering behind his eyes. The road had taught him how to face knives, guns, and prison bars. But not this, not his son fading in front of him. Behind the counter, Lena Cruz stopped mid-pour. Her instincts screamed. She'd waited tables for decades, raised a kid on tips and grit, learned the difference between bad luck and patterns. And this was a pattern burned into her memory. Same night, same booth. Same biker, same pale child. And always the same woman sliding the drink across the table. Evelyn Mercer. Calm. Polite, perfect hair. A pediatric nurse with a saint smile and eyes that never quite softened. Lena's chest tightened. This wasn't illness. This was timing. Precision, something done on purpose. Her heart pounded as the realization landed hard and cold. The boy wasn't sick by chance. Someone was making him sick. Slowly, carefully. Grimm stood to leave, chairs scraped. The window to act was closing fast. Lena wiped her hands on her apron, stepped out from behind the counter, and walked toward a man the world crossed the street to avoid, because letting fear keep her quiet felt deadlier than whatever came next. Before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments. And if this story hits hard, hit subscribe. Cal Grimm. Mercer looked like a man carved out of bad decisions and long miles. Decades on the road had etched themselves into his posture, into the way he stood like he was always bracing for impact. Ink climbed his neck and disappeared beneath his collar. Prison bar lines and faded symbols that told stories most people were smart enough not to ask about. Inside the Hells Angels Michigan chapter, Grimm wasn't known for loud speeches or reckless bloodshed. He was known for precision. When he said something would happen, it did. When he gave his word, it stayed given. That kind of consistency made men follow him without question. His presence carried a quiet gravity, the kind of danger that didn't bark or posture. It waited. But none of that armor worked against what was eating him alive. Beneath the leather and steel was a father watching his son slip further away every week. Doctors spoke in circles. Tests came back clean, then inconclusive, then useless. Grimm sat through appointments feeling smaller each time, nodding while professionals shrugged. He could fight enemies he could see. This had no face. Just a slow, creeping fear that he was losing his boy and didn't even know who to blame. Noah Mercer was too quiet for a kid his age. Too careful. He said please and sorry like reflexes, like survival tools. When his stomach twisted or his hand shook, he apologized before anyone could speak, as if sickness was a personal failure. He flinched at sudden movements and went rigid when Evelyn's shadow crossed him. He never cried loud. He just folded inward, carrying fear in silence. Noah was innocence caught in the crossfire of adults who should have protected him, learning too early that obedience felt safer than questions. Lena Cruz saw all of it because she had learned how to see. Life had sharpened her. A single mother who'd balanced rent, school schedules, and double shifts, she knew the look of exhaustion that went deeper than sleep. She knew desperation when she saw it. Lena didn't have authority or status, but she had something more dangerous: attention. She noticed the way Noah's sickness followed a schedule. She noticed who poured the drinks. She noticed how Evelyn's smile never reached her eyes. Staying quiet would have been easier. Safer. But Lena understood the cost of silence. She'd paid it before. That understanding turned her into the spark this story needed. Evelyn Mercer never looked like a threat. Her voice stayed calm, soothing even. Her hair was always neat, her clothes clean, her demeanor professional. As a pediatric nurse, she spoke the language of care fluently. She knew how to guide conversations, how to frame symptoms, how to make doubt sound reasonable. Behind closed doors, she treated Noah's suffering like a project, logged, adjusted. Medicine, paperwork, and public trust were her weapons. She didn't lash out. She calculated. That invisibility made her far more dangerous than any open monster. When Grimm finally took the problem to the club, it landed in the hands of Marcus "Ghost" Hale. Ghost had once worn a badge, hunted killers with patience and paperwork before walking away from the system that burned him out. As chapter president, he ran the club like an operation, not a mob. He understood that rage without direction destroyed everything it touched. From the start, Ghost made one thing clear: this wasn't about revenge. This was a rescue. And rescues required discipline. The brothers fell into place without argument. Eli "Doc" Reyes, a former combat medic, brought a steady presence and skilled hands, becoming Noah's shield and anchor. Tomas Judge Navarro, retired from family court but sharp as ever, translated outrage into lawful leverage, ensuring the child wouldn't slip back into danger. Ryan Switch Keller worked quietly behind screens, digging through digital trails predators always underestimated. Frank Anvil Kowalski, an elder with scars older than most men's regrets, handled security and containment, making sure no mistakes followed them home. All of it unfolded against the backdrop of Rust Belt Michigan cold streets, sagging houses, and quiet neighborhoods where trouble hid behind drawn curtains. Engines roared when needed, but planning happened in low voices and closed rooms. The contrast defined the Brotherhood's code: loud when protection demanded it, careful when lives depended on precision. In a world quick to judge by appearances, these men chose restraint for one simple reason: protecting the innocent mattered more than reputation, pride, or fear. Lena Cruz stepped out into the parking lot like she was walking into a storm. The neon from the diner sign bled across the wet pavement, turning puddles into bruised colors. Cold air cut through her apron, and for a second she almost turned back. Men like Cal Grimm, Mercer, weren't the kind you tapped on the shoulder with bad news. Men like him were the kind people watched from behind curtains and locked doors. But when Lena looked through the glass and saw Noah curled small against the booth, pale and apologizing for the crime of being sick, something inside her refused to sit still. Grimm was already outside, holding the diner door open with one broad shoulder. He moved with the heavy patience of a man who had learned not to waste motion. Noah shuffled beside him, head down, one hand wrapped around his own stomach like he was trying to keep himself together. Evelyn Mercer followed like a shadow, dressed in soft perfume and clean confidence, smoothing her coat sleeves, smiling politely at the night like the world had never harmed anyone. Lena's heart hammered so hard she felt it in her throat. Her hand shook as she crossed the lot, but her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Cal Mercer," she said. Grimm stopped like the name had weight. His head turned slowly, eyes locking on her with a look that warned most people to keep walking. He didn't threaten. He didn't posture. He simply looked, and that was enough to make the air feel tighter. Evelyn's smile stayed in place. "Can we help you?" she asked, gentle as a nurse checking a patient chart. Lena didn't answer Evelyn. She kept her gaze on Grimm, because the truth didn't belong to the woman who'd been serving poison with a smile. The truth belonged to the father whose boots were planted in the dark like he was ready to fight the whole world if it came down to it. "I work here," Lena said. "I've watched you come in. Every Thursday. Same booth, same time." Grimm's jaw flexed, and for a moment Lena thought she'd made a mistake. But he didn't move. He didn't speak. He just waited. Lena swallowed. "Your boy's been getting worse. Not random. Not bad luck. It's a pattern." Evelyn let out a soft laugh, the kind designed to make Lena feel foolish. "He's under medical care," she said, still calm. Still bright-eyed. "We've seen specialists." Lena's hands trembled harder as she reached into her apron pocket. She'd kept it all there, like contraband: folded notes, printed photos, timestamps written in pen. It felt insane to bring evidence to a parking lot confrontation, but that's what fear did. It made you prepare in ways that looked crazy to anyone who didn't understand what was at stake. She handed the stack to Grimm. "Pictures," she said. "Dates. Times. When he started shaking. When he got pale. When he left food untouched." Every week, it's later by a little at first, then sooner. Like whatever's doing it is building up. Grimm stared at the papers like they were a knife blade laid on a table. He didn't glance once at Evelyn. His attention stayed fixed on what Lena had given him. He read. He absorbed. The silence stretched so long, Lena thought he might rip the papers in half and tell her to mind her business. Instead, he spoke low. "Why you doing this?" Lena's throat tightened. "Because nobody else is," she answered. "And because I got a kid too. And because that look on his face isn't just sickness. It's fear." That was when Grimm's eyes shifted, not to Lena, but to Noah. The boy stood close to Evelyn, but not touching her. His shoulders were stiff. His gaze stayed down. And when Evelyn's hand drifted toward his hair, Noah flinched, small, quick, like a reflex. Something in Grimm's face changed. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was the crack of a foundation giving way. Evelyn's tone cooled just a fraction. "This is inappropriate," she said, still wrapped in politeness. "You're overstepping." Lena felt her courage wobble, but she forced the words out before she could lose them. "I watched who brings the drinks," she said. "Every time, it's her. She brings them. She insists he finishes them. And right after every time he starts sweating, shaking. Like his body's trying to fight something off." Evelyn's smile didn't drop, but her eyes sharpened. "Are you accusing me of harming my stepson?" she asked, voice still soft enough to sound reasonable. "That's a serious thing to say." Lena didn't take the bait. That's what predators counted on, people getting emotional and messy so they could dismiss everything as drama. Lena stayed calm, even as her heart tried to claw out of her chest. "I'm not calling you names," she said. "I'm telling his father what I've seen." Grimm finally looked up from the papers. When his eyes met Lena's, they were darker now. Not wild, focused. Like something inside him had found a target after weeks of swinging at air. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "You sure?" he asked. Lena nodded. "As sure as a person can be when they don't have a lab. But I've served thousands of people in this diner. I've seen food poisoning, flu, panic attacks. This is different. This is repeated, measured." Evelyn stepped forward, smile returning to full brightness like a weapon being polished. "Cal, let's go," she murmured. "This is nonsense." She's a waitress, not a doctor. And that's when Grimm did something Lena didn't expect. He didn't explode. He didn't shout. He didn't grab anyone by the throat. He listened. He looked at Noah again. Looked at the way the boy's fingers clenched and unclenched like he was trying to hold back pain. Looked at the way he wouldn't meet Evelyn's eyes. Looked at the way he stood closer to his father when Grimm shifted his weight. Grimm folded the papers carefully, like they mattered. Like Lena mattered. Like the truth mattered. "Get in the truck," he told Noah. Noah moved fast, relief flickering across his face for half a second before he remembered to hide it. Evelyn blinked. "Cal?" Grimm's gaze snapped to her. Calm but sharp as broken glass. "You're riding with me," he said. It wasn't the question. Evelyn's smile tightened. "We can talk at home," she said, voice gentle again, trying to guide him back into the rhythm she controlled. Grimm nodded once, slow. "Yeah," he said, "we will." Lena watched them leave, her body trembling like she'd run a mile. She didn't know what would happen next. She only knew she'd stepped onto a road you didn't step off easily. That night, Grimm didn't go home like normal. He took Evelyn inside, kept his voice low, his movements controlled, and asked questions that sounded simple but carried the weight of a blade. "Why's he worse every Thursday?" he asked. "Why you always the one bringing the drinks? Why he flinch when you touch him?" Evelyn performed confusion perfectly. Hurt. Offended. The wronged caretaker. She talked about stress and trauma, about how hard she'd worked for this family, about how cruel it was to accuse her. But fear doesn't hide as well as people think. And Grimm saw it. Just a flicker, a slip behind her calm mask when he asked about the vitamins, when he asked why Noah's symptoms always came after something she handed him. It was only a second, but Grimm had lived in worlds where a second could get a man killed. He recognized it. That was the moment his world fully cracked open. He waited until Evelyn fell asleep, then rose quietly like he was going to handle club business. Noah was already curled up in bed, breathing shallow, cheeks too pale for a child. Grim stood in the doorway for a long time, fists clenched so tight his knuckles ached. Then he leaned down, brushed his son's hair back gently, and whispered a promise Noah barely understood. "I got you," he said. "I'm gonna fix this." He walked out into the night and fired up his bike. The engine rolled thunder through the quiet street as he tore toward the clubhouse. When Grim arrived, the brothers knew something was wrong before he even spoke. The way he dismounted wasn't casual. It was purposeful, like he was stepping into a fight he'd already committed to. Ghost was called to the main table. The room shifted, all laughter dying, all eyes turning. Grim laid Lena's evidence down like it was a case file. "Waitress at the diner's been watching," he said. "She says my boy ain't sick. Says somebody's making him sick." The clubhouse went still, but not with doubt, with focus. Ghost didn't ask how many bodies Grim could stack. He asked one question. "What's the proof?" Grim's voice stayed steady. "Pattern," he said. "Photos. Dates. Timing. And I saw something in my wife tonight. A slip." Ghost's stare hardened. "Then we don't move on anger," he said. "We move on truth." Roles got assigned like orders in a war room. Doc was called to prep medical support. Judge was told to pull emergency custody routes. Switch was brought in to start digging. Within hours, Noah was in the care of an independent pediatric specialist, someone outside Evelyn's influence, outside the web of polite assumptions she'd built. Tests were run that should have been run weeks ago. Toxic panels, careful screening, analysis that didn't treat nurse stepmother like a guarantee of safety. The results came back like a punch to the throat. Repeated exposure. Slow buildup. Substances masked inside supplements and vitamins. No accident. No mystery illness. Intent. When Doc read the report, his face went hard. When he handed it to Grim, Grim didn't speak for a long time. His hands shook once, just once, then steadied. Because the truth was finally visible. And it was worse than sickness. It was betrayal. Walking away now would mean burying his son. Grim looked around at his brothers, then down at the paper again, and something settled into him, something cold and exact. "This ain't a bar fight," he said quietly. "This ain't revenge." Ghost nodded. "No," he answered. "This is a rescue." Grim's eyes lifted, dark and certain. He chose war. But not the loud kind. The surgical kind. The clubhouse didn't explode into chaos. It didn't turn into shouting and broken bottles and men grabbing weapons off walls. That was the old stereotype, the one the outside world clung to because it made their fear feel justified. What happened instead was colder. Cleaner. The kind of movement you saw in units that had learned the price of mistakes. Ghost stood at the center of it, hands braced on the table, eyes scanning faces like he was counting resources. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The room leaned toward him instinctively. "We do this right," he said. "No noise. No hero moves. No shortcuts." Men nodded. Not because they were scared of Ghost, but because they believed him. Discipline wasn't weakness in their world. It was survival. Grim didn't sit. He paced near the wall, jaw clenched so tight the muscle in his cheek twitched. His hands kept flexing, opening and closing, like he was trying to hold back the part of him that wanted to burn everything down immediately. He wanted to ride back to that house and rip the truth out of Evelyn with his bare hands. But Noah's face kept flashing in his mind. Pale, trembling, apologizing. That's what held him still. That's what kept him listening. Doc arrived first, rolling in with a medical bag that looked like it had seen war zones. Eli Doc Reyes didn't talk much. He didn't need to. His hands were steady, his eyes sharp, his voice calm in a way that made panic feel stupid. "I want him somewhere safe," Doc said, looking at Grim. "Not a hospital she can walk into and charm. Not a doctor she already knows." Ghost nodded. "We got a place," he answered. Within the hour, Noah was moved under quiet protection. No sirens. No drama. Just a different vehicle than normal, a different route, and brothers stationed at corners like shadows. The kid didn't understand everything, but he understood enough to feel the shift. For the first time in a long time, adults were moving with purpose around him, like his life mattered more than comfort. Doc stayed close, not hovering like a stranger, not overwhelming. Just present. He checked Noah's pulse, watched his breathing, kept water nearby, spoke softly when Noah's eyes drifted toward the door like he expected danger to walk in. "You're doing good, kid," Doc said. "Ain't your fault." Noah stared at him with tired, suspicious eyes. Kids like Noah didn't trust compliments. They trusted consistency. Doc understood that. While Doc worked on Noah's body, Judge started working on the battlefield. No one romanticized. Court papers, emergency filings, legal traps that could either save a child or hand him right back to the predator. Tomas Judge. Navarro spread documents across the table like he was building a map. His hands were older, but his mind was sharp as a blade. "We need emergency custody," he said. "Tonight. Not tomorrow. Not after she spins a story. If we don't lock this down, the system can bounce him right back into that house because she's got the title and the job and the smile." Grimm leaned over the table, eyes burning. "Do it," he said. Judge didn't flinch. "I will," he replied, "but you do what I say. You don't touch her. You don't threaten her. You don't give her a single reason to claim you're violent and unstable." That last word hit Grimm like a slap. Unstable. That was what men like him were always labeled the second they raised their voice. That was what Evelyn would lean on. That was how she would win. Ghost stepped in, voice quiet. "You hear him, Grimm?" Grimm's fists tightened, then loosened. "Yeah," he said through his teeth. "I hear him." Switch took over next. Ryan Switch. Keller didn't look like the kind of guy who belonged in a biker clubhouse at first glance. Leaner build, eyes that missed nothing, fingers always moving like they were typing invisible keys. But brothers respected Switch because he hunted in places fists couldn't reach. He sat with a laptop open, screens lighting his face in the dim room. "She's a nurse," he said. "That means she knows systems. She knows how to bury evidence under paperwork. But nobody's perfect. Everybody leaves a trail." Switch dug into purchase histories, pharmacy records, online orders, deleted emails, cloud backups. He looked for patterns the way Lena had, only now those patterns lived in receipts and timestamps. Within hours, he started finding threads. Supplements ordered in bulk that no child should need. Detox kits. Items that looked harmless until you understood dosage and repetition. Insurance policies taken out and adjusted. Search histories that had no business in a normal household symptom management, detection windows, substances that mimicked illness. Switch's jaw tightened as he worked. "She didn't just do this," he muttered. "She planned it." Grimm watched from behind him, every new discovery slicing deeper. He could have handled a random monster. He could have handled an enemy who hated him. But this was someone he'd trusted, someone he'd brought into his home. That betrayal tasted worse than blood, and Evelyn could feel the shift even without seeing the clubhouse. Predators always sensed when the air changed, when control started slipping, when the victim stopped folding. Evelyn tightened her schedule like a woman pulling a noose. She doubled down on what had always worked: more careful dosing, stricter control, more performance for outsiders. She started keeping Noah closer when she could, watching him with the calm focus of someone managing an experiment. Her voice stayed sweet, but her patience thinned. Her eyes lingered too long on doors and windows, like she expected Grimm to come home different. When Grimm didn't, she adjusted. She called doctors. She pushed for appointments. She made it sound like she was the only one fighting for Noah's life. She called in favors, dropped names, used her job like a shield. Then the threats started. First came the legal pressure, a call to Grimm's phone from a number he didn't recognize. A clipped voice informing him that a report had been filed, an accusation that Noah was unsafe around violent associates, that his environment was unstable, that there would be questions. Grimm listened in silence, eyes narrowing. Then came false reports. A visit from a stiff-faced social worker asking polite questions, taking notes with the kind of detached tone that made it clear they'd already decided what they believed. Evelyn had moved first. She was building a story. A grieving nurse stepmother trying to save a sick child while the biker father spiraled. Ghost saw it for what it was. "She's shaping the narrative," he said. "She knows the system better than we do. That means we don't give her anything to use." Grimm's anger boiled, but something else rose alongside it. Fear, not for himself. For Noah. For the possibility that even with all this evidence, the world would still hand his son back to the woman poisoning him because she looked safer on paper. That fear did something to Grimm. It didn't break him. It sharpened him. He started showing up for Noah in small ways that mattered more than grand gestures. He sat beside him quietly while Doc checked vitals. He brought a blanket from home that smelled faintly like his cologne and engine oil, familiar enough to calm Noah's tight breathing. He told Noah stories, not big outlaw legends, but simple ones about riding through rain, about fixing a bike with the wrong tools, about mistakes that didn't end the world. Noah listened. At first, he didn't speak. He just watched his father like he was trying to relearn who Grimm was without Evelyn's voice in his ear. But over days, something shifted. Noah started sitting closer. He started eating a little more. He stopped apologizing every time his stomach turned, because Grimm stopped letting him. "Don't say sorry," Grimm told him one night, voice rough. "Ain't your job to apologize for surviving." Noah blinked hard, like he was holding back something too heavy for his small chest. I make things hard," he whispered. Grimm's eyes darkened, and he leaned in until Noah couldn't look away. "No," he said. "She did." That word, she, landed like a door opening. Noah didn't answer, but he didn't flinch either. Then the first real danger hit. It happened on a night that felt almost normal for the first time in weeks. Noah had eaten half a sandwich. He'd even smiled faintly at something Doc said. Grimm watched him like a starving man watching food, terrified it might vanish. Then Noah's face went blank. His eyes rolled slightly, unfocused. His small hand lifted, shaky, toward his chest like he couldn't find his breath. Doc was on him in seconds. "Noah," he said sharply, but controlled. "Hey, stay with me." Noah's body sagged, and a thin, broken sound came from his throat. Grimm lurched forward, panic ripping through the careful control he'd been forcing into place. "What's happening?" he snapped. Doc's voice stayed calm, but his eyes hardened. "He's crashing," he said. Earlier than expected. Noah's skin went colder, sweat breaking across his forehead. His breathing turned shallow. Doc started working fast, checking airway, checking pulse, calling for what he needed. Ghost was already on the phone, moving pieces. And Grimm stood there, frozen for half a heartbeat, staring at his boy slipping again, realizing the worst truth of all. Evelyn hadn't stopped. Whatever she'd done before, Noah was moved had been enough to hit now, like a delayed strike, or she'd found a way to reach him anyway. Grimm's hand shook with rage, but this time he didn't swing it outward. He focused it into one thought, one burning certainty. The clock wasn't just ticking, it was sprinting. And if they didn't end this soon, Noah wasn't going to make it to the part of the story where he laughed again. Noah's collapse didn't just scare them. It clarified the battlefield. It ripped the last layer of denial off the room and left only raw urgency underneath. Doc got the kid stabilized, but his face stayed tight long after Noah's breathing evened out. He didn't have to say it for everyone to feel it. Whatever Evelyn had done, it was working faster now. Ghost didn't waste a second. He ordered the clubhouse into motion, like a man snapping a trap shut. The brothers didn't argue. They didn't posture. They moved. Switch kept digging, eyes bloodshot from staring at screens, fingers moving like he was trying to outrun time. Judge pushed filings through any court window that would open, tightening the legal net before Evelyn could twist the system again. Doc logged everything, every symptom, every test result, every medication Noah had been exposed to, turning the boy's suffering into a record no courtroom could shrug off. Evidence started piling up like snow in a hard winter. At first it was small, the kind of things Evelyn thought looked harmless on their own vitamin bottles, supplement jars, receipts with clean branding and cheerful labels. But Doc and Switch knew how predators hid poison inside innocence. They started cross-checking ingredients, dosages, overlap. One bottle didn't look like murder. 20 bottles did. Switch found bank transfers that didn't fit a nurse's salary. Purchases routed through secondary accounts. Search history scrubbed but not erased. Ghost traces of terms that made the air in the room go cold. How long substances stayed in a child's system. How to mimic chronic illness. How to avoid detection. Then he found the thing that made Grimm's stomach drop. An insurance policy. Not new, but recently adjusted. Benefits increased. Timelines aligned with Noah's decline. Grimm stared at the screen, feeling his own heartbeat in his ears. "She planned this," he muttered, voice like gravel. Ghost's gaze was hard. "Yeah," he said, "she did." But every step forward stirred resistance like a nest of hornets. The system didn't move fast for bikers. It moved slow, cautious, suspicious. The more evidence they gathered, the more the world around them tried to reframe the story into something simpler, something safer for officials to swallow. A nurse stepmother. A sick child. A biker father with a reputation. The paperwork practically wrote itself. Evelyn leaned into that narrative like she'd been born for it. She showed up to appointments with tear-reddened eyes and a trembling voice. She spoke in medical language that made doctors nod along. She told them Noah's father had become unpredictable, that he was surrounded by dangerous people, that she feared for the boy's safety. She didn't have to lie big. She only had to tilt the truth, and people filled in the rest with their own prejudice. Authorities hesitated. They didn't say it out loud, but Ghost recognized it in the way they asked questions, in the way they looked at Grimm's tattoos and leather, like those were evidence. They treated the club like the threat, and Evelyn like the solution. It was exactly what Evelyn wanted. Then Switch cracked open a door to the past. It started as a name buried in an old email chain, someone Evelyn had once been attached to, a man whose last name had been quietly filed away like a closed case. Switch traced it, digging into public records and old news blurbs, chasing a thread most people would have ignored. A former husband, dead. Ruled natural causes at the time. Complications. Illness. No foul play. But the pattern felt too familiar, too clean, too convenient. Ghost stared at the file as Switch laid it out. "Same signs?" Ghost asked. Switch nodded. "Same kind of timeline," he said. "Slow decline. Medical confusion. And she was the caretaker then, too." Grimm's breath came out sharp, like he'd been punched. "You telling me she's done this before?" Switch didn't answer with words. He didn't need to. He showed the overlap insurance changes, symptom journaling, hospital visits stacked like stepping stones. A past death resurfacing didn't just raise the stakes. It changed the shape of the monster. This wasn't a stressed caregiver making a mistake. This was a predator refining a method. Judge's eyes narrowed as he read. "If we can connect this," he said, "she doesn't just go down for what she did to Noah. She goes down for who she is." But connecting it meant time. Warrants. Reopened files. Examinations. And time was exactly what they didn't have. While the club worked, the heat turned up on them. Cars started appearing near the clubhouse, plain, parked a little too long, drivers pretending to scroll phones while their eyes tracked doors. A patrol car rolled by slow more than once, not responding to anything, just letting the presence be felt. Grimm noticed unfamiliar faces near his house, men who didn't belong in that neighborhood but acted like they did. Legal pressure followed, calls from offices. Requests for statements, routine questions. Ghost called it what it was. "Surveillance," he said. "They're waiting for us to slip. Waiting for us to give Evelyn a reason to play the victim harder." Grimm's past violence wasn't just a rumor to outsiders. It was a file somewhere. An old incident. A fight that got out of hand. A time he'd been younger, angrier, and less careful. Evelyn knew it. She would drag it into the light the second it helped her, and she tried. A report surfaced accusing Grimm of threatening her. No proof. Just her word, delivered with shaking hands, and a story designed to make a judge swallow sympathy without chewing. The system leaned toward believing her because she fit the role of safe. Judge slammed his palm onto the table. "She's trying to bait you," he told Grimm. "She wants you to react. She wants you to do something she can hold up like a trophy." Grimm stood rigid, face dark. His whole body screamed for action. Every instinct he'd ever trusted told him to crush the threat before it struck again, but Noah's pale face stayed in his mind. And Grim did the harder thing. He held the line. He didn't text Evelyn threats. He didn't show up at her work. He didn't roar down her street and let neighbors call the cops. He followed Ghost's plan, even when it felt like swallowing fire. Because the goal wasn't to scare Evelyn. The goal was to save Noah and bury her in evidence so deep she'd never crawl out. Noah was moved again, deeper into protection. Not just a safe house full coverage. Rotating brothers. Different vehicles. Different routes. No predictable patterns. The kind of security reserved for high-value targets, because that's what Noah had become, a child whose life was worth more than anyone's comfort. Doc stayed close and kept Noah stable, but he also watched Grim carefully. He saw what the restraint was costing him. Grim sat beside Noah's bed, sometimes like a statue, eyes open all night, hands clenched, breathing slow. Noah started to trust in small ways. He began asking where they were going. He began accepting food without fear. He even slept a little deeper when Grim was in the room, like his body finally believed safety was possible. But Evelyn wasn't blind. Predators notice when their victims slip out of reach. Evelyn realized she was losing control when Noah stopped returning home, when doctors stopped looping her into every decision, when her calls weren't returned immediately, when Cal's silence turned from passive to deliberate. She didn't panic the way normal people did. She calculated. Switch caught the first sign of it in her digital behavior. Searches for travel, for cash withdrawals, for how to erase accounts cleanly. She started selling small things online. She shifted money between places. She began closing doors one by one. Ghost read the report and felt the same cold certainty that had settled over him the day Lena stepped into that parking lot. "She's preparing to run," he said. Judge's voice went tight. "If she disappears, we lose her. And if we lose her, she could show up somewhere else and do this again." Grim's eyes lifted. The restraint in them was still there, but something darker sat underneath now, finality. "How long?" Grim asked. Switch's fingers moved fast, pulling timelines. "Not long," he said. "She's cleaning house. That means she's either leaving or she's making one last move." Doc looked up sharply. "One last move," he repeated. "That's the part that scares me, because a predator cornered doesn't always run. Sometimes they try to finish the job." The countdown wasn't just accelerating. It was screaming. Every hour that passed was another hour. Evelyn had to vanish, to twist the narrative, to strike at Noah through some back door nobody had seen yet. The club could feel the pressure tightening like a vice. The evidence was strong, but the system moved slow. And Evelyn was fast. Ghost stared around the table, meeting each brother's eyes. "We're at the edge," he said quietly. "From here, we either end this clean, or she ends it messy." Grim said nothing. He didn't need to. His eyes drifted toward the door, toward the dark outside, toward the road that led to the woman who'd been poisoning his son with a smile. He wasn't going to lose Noah, not now. Not ever. And somewhere out there, Evelyn Mercer was packing a bag, counting her money, rehearsing her next lie, thinking she still had control. She didn't know the truth yet. She didn't know that when the Hells Angels decided something mattered, they didn't need chaos to win. They needed precision, and they were coming. Dawn came in like steel. The sky over Rust Belt, Michigan was the color of old bruises, low clouds dragging across rooftops and bare trees like the world itself was holding its breath. Streetlights still glowed in pockets of fog, and the air smelled like wet asphalt and winter rot. Most people were still asleep, wrapped in blankets, unaware that something final was about to move through their quiet neighborhood. Then the engines came, not roaring, not screaming, not the usual thunder that announced a club ride like a warning shot. This was different. 180 motorcycles rolled forward with discipline, muffled pipes, and controlled speed, the sound more like a deep pulse than a threat. Headlights cut through fog in clean lines, white beams sliding across fences and parked cars and dark windows. They weren't there to intimidate. They were there to shield. Ghost rode at the front, posture straight, eyes forward. Grim was close behind him, hands firm on the grips, jaw locked so tight it looked like it might crack. Around them, brothers held formation like a moving wall, spacing perfect, movement precise. No wild weaving, no showboating, no chaos. This wasn't a parade. It was a perimeter, a rescue operation in leather and chrome. 2 blocks out from Evelyn's house, they split cleanly into teams. Anvil took the outer ring with a handful of older brothers, men who didn't need adrenaline to stay sharp. They moved to street corners and side alleys, stationed like sentries. Their job wasn't to fight. Their job was to witness, to record, to make sure no one slipped out and no one slipped in. Judge and Ghost rode straight to the rendezvous point where law enforcement and child services waited. It had taken hours of calls, paperwork, and careful pressure to get to this moment. The warrants were signed. The chain of evidence was locked down. The plan was set in ink, not rage. Switch had done what he did best, turned suspicion into certainty. He'd built an airtight timeline, purchase histories, deleted searches recovered, insurance documents, messages Evelyn thought she'd wiped. He'd given prosecutors something they couldn't ignore without risking their own careers. He'd made it impossible for anyone to shrug and say, inconclusive. Doc rode in the back of the formation with Noah in a secured vehicle, close enough to reach him in seconds. Noah wasn't on a bike. He was wrapped in a blanket, eyes wide, watching headlights through a window. He didn't understand the legal machinery. He didn't understand warrants. But he understood something else. He understood he wasn't alone anymore. He understood that big men with rough faces and tattooed hands had decided his life mattered. As the operation began, Ghost walked up to Detective Raines, one of the few who looked at the evidence instead of Grimm's leather. She was all business, her face set, her voice clipped. Cameras were already there. Not because anyone wanted a circus, but because Ghost had insisted on it. You film everything, Ghost had told them. I want this clean. I want it recorded. I want no room for her to twist the story. Detective Raines nodded once. We execute, she said. Grimm stood a few feet back, still as stone, watching the house where he'd slept beside Evelyn, where he'd trusted her, where Noah had grown sick behind closed doors. Every instinct in him wanted to storm the porch and drag her out by the collar. His blood demanded something simple and violent. Ghost didn't look at him, but his voice carried like a quiet anchor. Stay here, he said. You move wrong once, she wins. Grimm's hands tightened around nothing. His breathing stayed measured. He stared at the front door like he could burn it down with his eyes. He held the line. The knock came. Hard. Official. Police, Detective Raines called. Open the door. A beat passed. Then the door cracked open, and Evelyn Mercer appeared like she'd been expecting company. She wore a soft sweater. Her hair was neat. Her face was pale in the morning light, eyes wide with practiced confusion. She looked exactly like the woman the system wanted to believe. What is this? She asked, voice trembling just enough to sound authentic. Is Noah? Where is my stepson? Detective Raines stayed flat. Ma'am, we have a warrant, she said, holding it up. Step back. Evelyn's eyes flicked over the paper, and for a fraction of a second, just a fraction, her mask slipped, not into panic, into calculation. Like a chess player realizing the board had changed. Then she snapped back into performance. This is insane, she whispered, hand lifting to her mouth. I'm a nurse. I've been trying to save him. Cal's unstable, Her eyes darted, searching, and found Grimm. For a heartbeat, everything went quiet inside his skull. He saw her eyes lock on him. He saw something cold under the tears. He saw the truth that had been hiding behind that saint's smile. And he felt the old Grimm rise, violent, unforgiving, ready. His boots shifted. Ghost didn't grab him. He didn't need to. He just spoke low, steady. Don't touch her, he said. Let the proof touch her. Grimm stopped. Evelyn's lips parted as if she wanted to say his name, wanted to hook him into an emotional reaction she could feed to cameras and cops alike. But he didn't give her anything. Detective Raines stepped forward, and officers moved past Evelyn into the house. The team split in practiced flow, scanning rooms, documenting everything, calling out findings as they went. Kitchen clear. Upstairs. Medicine cabinet. Doc's information guided them. What to look for, what mattered, what proved intent. Bottles were bagged. Labels photographed. A handwritten logbook was found inside a locked drawer, pages filled with neat handwriting, dosage notes, symptom tracking, planned adjustments. It wasn't a diary. It was a blueprint. Switch stood just outside, laptop open, syncing digital evidence in real time. He had warrants, too, access to devices, cloud accounts, emails. The moment officers brought Evelyn's phone and tablet out, Switch went to work like a surgeon. "What's on it?" Ghost asked. Switch's jaw tightened. "Everything," he said. He pulled recovered messages, coded conversations with a man who had a history of fraud. He pulled search terms that were impossible to explain away. He pulled drafts of insurance claims. He pulled files labeled like medical reports that weren't medical reports at all, just staged narratives, rehearsed lines, and contingency plans. Evelyn tried to keep her composure as the evidence stacked up, but her eyes started moving faster. Her breathing changed. She wasn't scared like an innocent person. She was cornered like a predator who couldn't find an exit. When Detective Raines turned back toward her, warrant in hand, the morning light caught Evelyn's face in a way that stripped her performance clean. "Evelyn Mercer," Raines said, voice clear, loud enough for cameras. "You are under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder, child abuse, and fraud." Evelyn's mouth opened. "No," she breathed. This is a mistake. Tell them. Tell them how unstable you've been. Tell them how he—" Her words were a hook thrown straight at Grimm. Grimm's eyes didn't blink, his face didn't move. He watched her like she was a stranger because that's what she was now, and that silence hurt her more than a fist ever could. Rain stepped in and cuffed her, metal clicking clean and final. Cameras caught everything, the calm arrest, the evidence being carried out, Evelyn's mask cracking as she realized she couldn't charm her way out this time. Evelyn's breath came faster. "You don't understand," she hissed, voice sharpening. He was sick. He was always sick. "I was trying." But her words collapsed under weight they couldn't carry. There was too much proof. Too much pattern. Too much intent. As officers guided her down the steps, Evelyn finally looked past the cameras and cops toward the line of motorcycles and leather-clad men standing silent in formation. She'd built her power on invisibility, on the assumption that nobody would connect the dots. Now she was visible, and she hated it. Grimm stood still while she passed, fists clenched, nails biting into his palms. He smelled her perfume in the cold air and felt bile rise in his throat. Every cell in his body screamed to do something irreversible. He didn't. Because Ghost was right. Because Judge was right. Because Lena was right. Because no one needed a father who won, not a father who reacted. Doc's voice came over the radio, quiet but urgent. "We're moving the kid," he said. "He's stable. He's breathing good." Grimm's chest loosened, just a fraction. Noah survived because precision beat rage. That truth sat heavy in the morning air, in the quiet formation of bikes, in the clean click of cuffs, in the way the cameras captured a story that couldn't be rewritten. Later, when Noah was brought into a safe room and wrapped in warmth, he looked up at Grimm with tired eyes. "Am I in trouble?" Noah whispered, voice small. Grimm swallowed hard, the roughness in his throat almost breaking him. He knelt down, lowering himself until his face was level with his son's. "No," he said. "You're safe." Noah stared at him like he didn't know how to believe it yet. Grimm reached out slowly, giving the boy room to pull away if he needed. Noah didn't pull away. He leaned in, resting his forehead against Grimm's chest like he'd been holding his breath for months, and finally found air. Across town, Lena Cruz sat in her diner booth alone, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. She watched the morning news on a small television above the counter, her heart pounding as the footage rolled. Evelyn in cuffs, evidence bags, motorcycles lined like a wall. Lena didn't smile. She exhaled like a woman who had carried something heavy and finally set it down. And in the clubhouse, Ghost looked around at his brothers and said the words that reshaped them all. "This is what strength looks like," he murmured. "Restraint." Even Anvil, old and scarred, nodded slowly, like he was admitting something to himself. Grim didn't speak. He just sat with Noah, feeling the boy's weight against him, realizing the defining action of his life wasn't violence. It was control. It was choosing the hard path. It was letting justice land harder than his fists ever could. And in the quiet after the storm, every man involved understood the same thing. They would never look at dangerous and safe the same way again. The courtroom didn't roar. It didn't gasp. It absorbed. Evelyn Mercer sat at the defense table in a pale blouse that tried to soften her edges, hands folded like prayer, eyes downcast when the cameras swung her way. She looked smaller there, stripped of the house, the routine, the control, but the evidence didn't shrink with her. It filled the room in careful stacks and measured words, delivered piece by piece until there was nowhere left to hide. Convictions followed the way gravity follows truth. Attempted murder, child abuse, fraud. Each charge landed with a dull, final weight that no smile could lift. The judge's voice stayed even as sentences were handed down, years spoken calmly, methodically, as if reading the weather. Evelyn didn't cry when the gavel came down. She just stared ahead, eyes hollow now, finally exposed for what she was. Then the past came forward. A reopened file. A name spoken again after years of silence. Another man. Another slow decline. Another caregiver who had seemed devoted until the pattern emerged too late. The family of the first victim sat stiff in the gallery as experts explained what had been missed, what modern testing now revealed. Their grief didn't end with answers, but it sharpened into something closer to justice. They weren't erased anymore. They were seen. Noah didn't attend the sentencing. He didn't need to see cuffs or hear numbers. His healing happened elsewhere, in quieter rooms with softer voices. Therapy started slow, measured in trust rather than milestones. Some days he talked. Some days he didn't. Dr. Frentz. Walsh never pushed. She let him rebuild at his own pace, teaching him words for fear that didn't turn inward, teaching him that being hurt didn't make him weak. School came next. The first day back, Noah hesitated at the doorway, backpack clutched tight, eyes scanning like the world might still betray him. Grim knelt beside him, leather jacket creaking, and spoke low so only Noah could hear. "I'm right here," he said. "And if you need me, I'll still be here." Noah nodded and stepped inside. It wasn't magic. Healing never was. But weeks passed, and the shadows thinned. Noah started laughing again. Not the brittle kind, but real laughter that surprised him mid-sound. He made a friend. Then, another. He stopped apologizing for taking up space. The club never hovered. They showed up the way mountains showed up. Quiet, steady, impossible to ignore, but never in the way. A brother walked Noah to class when Grim couldn't make it. Another stood at the edge of a playground during recess, pretending to scroll a phone while watching everything. On Noah's birthday, there was cake and a single present from each man. Simple things chosen with care. No engines. No panches. Just presents. Normal life, carefully restored. Grim watched all of it with a kind of awe that unsettled him. He'd spent his life believing protection meant standing alone, absorbing blows so others didn't have to. Letting people help felt like weakness at first. Like losing control. Then he realized control wasn't the same as isolation. He learned to sleep again, not because the world was suddenly safe, but because he trusted others to hold the line with him. He learned to step back when doc spoke, to listen when judge advised, to accept help without seeing it as failure. And Noah noticed. One night, while they sat on the couch watching a movie neither of them was really paying attention to, Noah leaned over and rested his head against Grim's arm. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't planned. It was trust. Grim didn't move. He just stayed still, breathing slow, letting the moment exist without gripping it too tight. Weeks later, Lena Cruz poured coffee into the same cracked mug she'd used for years and glanced up as the diner door chimed. Cal Grim. Mercer walked in with Noah beside him. Same booth. Different air. Noah climbed in without hesitation, eyes bright, cheeks full of color. He ordered pancakes and ate them without fear, laughing when syrup dripped onto the table. Grim watched him with a quiet smile that didn't show teeth. Lena stood at the counter for a moment, just watching, heart tight in her chest. When she brought their plates over, Noah looked up at her and smiled. "Hi," he said. Lima swallowed hard. "Hi, sweetheart." Grim met her eyes, and there was something there that didn't need words. Gratitude. Respect. A shared understanding of what it cost to speak up. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't need to. Outside, the neon still flickered. Coffee still burned. The world still carried danger in quiet corners. But inside that booth, a boy ate and laughed and lived. And that was enough. Because sometimes resolution doesn't come with noise or victory speeches. Sometimes it looks like a child who no longer believes being alive is something he needs to apologize for. And sometimes that is the hardest, truest kind of justice there is. Evil doesn't always arrive with fists raised or voices shouting. Sometimes it shows up smiling, wearing credentials, speaking softly enough that no one thinks to question it. It hides behind trust, behind roles that society teaches us not to doubt. That's what makes it dangerous. It counts on people looking away, assuming someone else will notice first. The heroes in this story didn't look like heroes at first glance. A tired waitress. A quiet child. A group of men the world had already judged. None of them wore capes. None of them waited for permission. They paid attention when it would have been easier not to, and that attention saved a life. Brotherhood, in the end, wasn't about noise or violence. It wasn't about proving strength. It was about restraint, about knowing when to hold back and when to stand firm. The men who could have burned everything down chose control instead, because real protection isn't chaos. It's precision. The strongest choice made wasn't throwing a punch. It was believing the truth when it hurt, listening when pride begged for denial, and waiting long enough for justice to land clean. Patience didn't weaken them. It sharpened them. And because of that, a child lived. That is what strength looks like when it refuses to look away. Silence is what predators depend on. Not strength, not fear. Silence. And courage doesn't always look like power. It looks like speaking up when your voice shakes and doing the right thing when it would be easier to walk away. If this story hit you, take a second and tell us where you're watching from tonight. Drop it in the comments. If you believe stories like this matter, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs the reminder. And if you've ever stood up when it mattered most, your story belongs here too. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is pay attention.